Okay, I'm going to call the Facilities Management Transportation meeting for September 6th to order. Is there any public comment on the agenda?
None at this time.
None? Okay, with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Lally.
Good evening, everyone. The first item on tonight's agenda will be an update on the CMS asphalt and field progression, and Mr. Lynch from Dewey Engineering will provide us with tonight's update.
Good evening, everyone. Happy new school year. Hope today got off to a good start. Quick update on the middle school. I think Dave's driving the slideshow and Joe's driving the agenda, so he'll guide us tonight. But if you got a chance to drive by over the weekend to see Colonial Middle School, you saw the staff and parent parking lot completed with lines, and that went into action today. From all accounts I heard, things went well, even with the inclement weather out there today. So just a couple of photos here. Now that the old Colonial Middle School is gone and the new is in place, has quite a presence from Belvoir. As you look up at the new building, looks awfully nice. If you head forward there, Dave. Another shot looking down that shows the middle school and the parking lot as we started today. You may know that buses are still circling around the building as we await the completion of the bus parking lot, but we were able to sneak in the final course of asphalt paving around that bus loop, so that's been completed along with the parent loop. So it's starting to look like all the makeup is going on this school site. You head to the next. You see the parent and staff parking lot to the left. To the right, all of the grading and the stormwater is in for the new bus parking lot, which will be completed here in September. All the way to the far right is the new rain garden, otherwise known as a stormwater basin, that's installed for the site. So we are in the home stretch of Colonial Middle School. If you head to the next, I think I just did a couple of before and after slides. It really seems like it was only yesterday that we were plotting the course for this project back in June of 2019, looking ahead to September 2nd. What a change a couple of years makes on the project site. And on the next slide, just from the beginning of summer on the left, when school let out mid-June, we still had a piece of a building there, and we were maintaining a big retaining wall for parents to drop off students while school was operating. And here in September, the new parking lot is in play, and we've got a longer, straighter, less pothole-filled parent drop-off loop for the kids and their parents. Also new sidewalks that come from Belvoir up to the school, so the approach is really cleaned up quite a bit. If we go to the next, just a quick update on remaining work. I mentioned the bus parking lot needs to be scheduled and the completed, and the athletic fields need to be finished out front and out back. And I know you're contemplating the track out back, and also our plaza area that has some ornamental concrete walls and site lighting and such. That's all finishing. And that pretty much is our schedule. That's over here on the right. Pretty impressive. Through a rebid and COVID and the worst inflation that we've seen in quite some time, and that dreaded word supply chain, it's really a credit to Colonial School District, the board, the administration for guiding through, because our actual final completion date back there in 2019 was to be September 22nd of 2022. So we're tracking nicely on the work that's been completed and overcome a lot of changes thanks to your leadership. Okay. As I mentioned, paving and line striping was completed for the parent lot. The stormwater piping and the structures is complete. Now that the summer weather is over, we have the rain garden seeding and all of the growing that happens in the rain garden, and also the stormwater basin to be completed. There's a small retaining wall that was installed for the township as part of the arrangement with the access road for the buses. The concrete sidewalks and the plaza areas are completed, and our bus parking lot is expected to be completed by the 26th, which actually is a holiday. So we'll be working on site in order to get paving done on the holiday. Okay. Couple of other items that are ongoing. You have an emergency generator that is working and operable. There's a temporary load bank installed to help that generator work, and the permanent load bank that wants to be installed on this project, it's currently under review as an OSIP claim, the owner's insurance policy. They're taking a look at the cost of that, and I'm understanding that they're going to let us know where they stand here any day now. On to the next.
One quick question for you.
Yes.
So I remember OSIP, and that we agreed to do that. But why do we have to go the OSIP route since it never worked properly in the first place? Don't they just replace it, the manufacturer?
So this is a complex issue. It has to do with the electrical system in the building and harmonics that are generated by lighting drivers in the building. Okay.
Okay, sure.
So this is not a faulty right. This is not a faulty generator. It's not faulty lights. It's not faulty design. It's something that has come about because of the nature of harmonics created by LED lights. Now, this is a new occurrence for really everyone that's been involved. We have not seen this happen before. But in order to correct the issue, a load is added which offsets the capacitive loads of the lighting drivers. Okay,
Sure.
That's the best I can do. And so I thought, hey, this is an unforeseen, and we might as well try it the OSIP route to see if the coverage works for us.
Although, are they not going to say, like, this is not listed because we've never heard of it before?
I don't know what they're going to say, but they assigned an expert who
okay.
worked with the design team and everyone, gathered the information, understands what happens. He's relayed verbally to us that this person who also does design work doesn't design emergency generators or electrical systems any other way, and this is just an unforeseen condition.
Okay, that was a decent explanation. I have no idea what you said, but I get it.
And I'm not very far ahead of you, I promise, because again, this is something new to us.
Our position as the district, we've put inquiries in, not just with OSIP, but with all the contractors involved in this portion. And our position is the district is not responsible for this.
Well,
and it needs to be fixed.
I would assume our position should be that all of you should have known this because we could not have foreseen it if you didn't know about it.
Right.
So if I can also
So
add,
we're waiting for the expert to render an opinion so that we know who is responsible. Could be multiple parties, could be one party.
Explain this to Will sometime in depth. He'll get it.
okay, so my question is, knowing what happened here in this situation, how will it change, say, in your future speccing of projects? Like, how will your speccing be different for that than it is for this? And the other part of that is, in the specs, do we have to go back to the manufacturer's specifications and all that fine print that lists scientifically what does and doesn't work with it, and get all the way to the layers of the equipment on each end of it, whether it's the capacitors or the lighting or the drivers or the whatever, and then find out, oh yeah, in this like little small print here, it's not supposed to do that. Do you see where I'm going with this?
So there's two answers. First of all, this has been kicked around by Snyder Hoffman, who is the mechanical engineering firm on the job, Mechanical Electrical. And the question is what to do on future projects. And in the case of not knowing if this will be a problem because of the lighting drivers, the question is, do you put in preventative measures equal to what we're contemplating now on all future projects, not knowing if you're going to have it? On the flip side of that is, we've done schools for the past 10 years with LED light fixtures in them. And I've not seen this problem before.
I understand that, like, the concept, LED lights, emergency generator, but what I'm asking is the specifics. Is it a Lutron lighting system? Did Lutron list, like, these are the specs, and then somewhere along the lines they don't really match up, but nobody noticed?
So far, the answer is no, because the harmonics of the lighting drivers are not a specified item The other thing is it's an open specification, and so multiple manufacturers are allowed to bid on the project, are required to bid on the project by law. And so that's not something that is consistent between manufacturers of lighting fixtures. So unfortunately, that's where we are. I don't have a very crystal clear answer for you, but this is the way that the lighting system, the emergency transfer switch system, the generator system has been designed on many, many projects before, and this is something that we have not seen before.
I mean, I can add that, I talked to many facilities directors that have gone through new building, new construction, and, put my feelers out there also, and everyone's really interested to hear how it happened, but we're not really sure. So it is new to everybody that we're talking to. And it is very, very complicated to explain. Like, well, you might get it, but.
I think that's the thing that I was going to ask. Well, I had two things. Obviously, there's something that's messed up, but what exactly happens when, maybe I missed it, but what exactly happens when you switch to the emergency backup without the load?
So there's a trailer out there that has a load center on it.
Mm-hmm.
And think of that as a device that's generating a demand for voltage.
Right.
Okay. Without it, when the emergency transfer switch trips, meaning I want the generator to run, there's a call for power, right? The Pico has failed or whatever, and I need power to the building. And you don't necessarily know what is running that's on the automatic transfer switch. If it's the middle of winter, you might have heating equipment. If it's the middle of summer, you might have cooling equipment. Mm-hmm. Heating equipment has far less load than cooling equipment. What's also there are emergency light fixtures throughout the building. So there could be a time in which they're the only things that are running. The automatic transfer switch flips, and what happens is harmonics from these drivers are creating a false call for current from the generator. And the generator says, oh, all this stuff is running. I need to go as high as I can. And that call is higher than the generator can create. Mm-hmm. And so it's got its own governor, if you will, in it, and says, I can't create any more current. I'm going to shut down.
Okay.
And so the generator shuts down. The load center, when attached, is creating a constant load. Right. So that when power drops, the load center's still there. Generator says, oh, I can create that power. Generator kicks on and runs.
Okay. And maybe this is too technical, but is it possible to have someone rewrite the program that is controlling that, or that PLC or whatever that controller that's controlling the generator?
So we've done all of that.
You've done all that.
So there's been 2 companies that have come in and done studies on the power demand. The emergency generator manufacturer has been involved, and he's worked on his machine to give it all of the safe leeway that it can handle. And we still have this issue depending on what's running. And so by adding the load center, that resolves the issue.
And we even had Pico do a study to make sure the power that was being delivered to the building was okay.
Uh-huh.
So it was kind of like, we were all kind of sitting like, why is the generator shutting off? Because at first we really didn't have any real clue. Like, it's running for, 15, 20 minutes and then shuts off.
And I assume you understand this, Mr. Lally, so
I understand
you'll be
it to
able
the
keep
extent
us-
that Jamie does. It is very, very, if you speak to the electrical engineers that are working on it, or Vixar from the insurance company, I mean, he's impressed me as brilliant at this point, because he really gets it and kind of talks to us like, what don't you understand?
Just a quick question for clarification. So this issue was found because we were trying to test it out. We weren't in a real scenario where we needed the generator to cut on, but we were actually testing it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. We were testing it, and then as Jamie said, we ran a bunch of other tests, and then had an outside company come in, confirm what Pico found, and then actually look at our panels, and so it's unfortunate. I would probably feel better, although it's not nice to say, if someone else would go through it, so I wouldn't feel like it was just us.
I do have one more question. Now, obviously, it's a emergency generator, so you don't really want it to run that long. But since you have that additional load, what is the prospective additional fee for utilities? It's diesel, right? You said diesel or is it gas?
Natural
It
gas.
is
gas.
diesel. That's not natural gas, that's oil, right?
Natural gas.
Okay. So with the additional load, what will we expect to be the additional, like whatever runtime, like what would be the additional cost for runtime? Like, because we're going to have it for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, whatever we can keep it running for, right?
So the load bank doesn't do anything unless the generator's called for.
Right.
So that'll
If-
just
if-
sit there.
If,
So
say, for instance, there was something that happened and you needed to run it. So say over the next 10 years, you're running it for 45 days. But I'm just wondering, like, what would the additional cost? Because you have to think about it.
yeah, no, I think I understand what you're saying, but I don't think, so the generator, it'll still shut off with the automatic transfer. Like, it's not going to run any additional time. So when it calls, so if we have a power failure, the generator will get called by the ATS, which will turn the generator on, and as soon as it senses power restored by PICO, it shuts back down. So the load bank itself, I think, is Will's question, like, what is that generating?
Like, it's
and
a
that cost?
false load. It's a false load. It's not actually, you're
Right.
sending something to it, but you're not getting any work done from it,
Right,
but you're still paying for it.
right.
So that's what I was.
So I think if I hear you correct, I think it's a good question. What we're saying is like, so when the load bank does run, and we run it for 45 days, and let's say it has to run for, what is the
Additional,
cost of the additional
10%
cost? Right,
or
yeah.
15%
what is the
more
load
than what
bank?
we
Yeah,
would think.
I'd be happy to
I
look into
apologize,
it
Will,
for you.
I see what you're
I
saying.
think that the cost is insignificant.
Okay.
But I'm
It's just
I'm
the
happy to
the load
ask,
bank itself is
the
what
design
see
team
what
on
you're
that
saying.
one.
Okay.
So one other quick question. So did you say that there's something you've done that will, an extra add-on that is allowing it to work if we need it?
So what's happening right now is a temporary rented load center is sitting on the site.
Okay.
That's what's here now,
And that allows the generator
right?
okay.
Yep. What is proposed is the purchase and installation of a permanent load center in the building. The temporary goes away, and it's purchased and installed, and it
Okay.
runs that way forever. And
So there's no fixing this, as far as anyone knows, without adding a new component?
correct.
Okay. So it's the cost and the installation of that component that we're trying to get someone else to pay for?
The components of what was submitted to OSIP was the cost of the new load center, the rental of the existing load center, all of the testing that's been done to date by 3 firms who have been out there working on it. The load center sits outside on a pad. There's a little concrete pad that's in there as well. So all of those costs are in this claim that was submitted for review by the OSIP.
Do we have an ETA on timing to get an answer back from OSIP, just considering we're going into hurricane season and all of that and could lose power?
The expert called me last week. He has made his recommendation to the insurance company, to the OSIP. The OSIP has reached out to their carrier and is waiting on an answer. We were expecting that to be last week. Dave, I think you had heard the same thing. Now I'm expecting something this week.
Yeah, the report was submitted to the insurance company on Monday, the 29th, and I called OSIP, our representative, on Wednesday. He said right now it's under what they call coverage council. He said they could have said no, but he said there's hope. He said they could still say no, but it's really up to them. But he said when the report came back and the expert had no explanation why this happened, he said that at least they're considering for coverage right now.
And do we have a plan B if the answer is no?
Yeah, I mean, I think the plan B is we would have to use remaining allowance, and we're going to have to put a load bank in.
And what are we talking about financially?
The total cost that I mentioned with all of the items that I put out there is roughly $160,000.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. Any good news?
But as of now, the temporary fix will hold us over, correct?
We are
Correct.
safe with the rented load bank Dr. Christian and I went through this time and time, and we went through several tests. So before any of the students got in the building, we made sure that everything ran, and if there was an incident, their power went down, everyone's safe. It will operate normal.
How much of the fix is sunk cost already? Like the rentals and the pad, and how much is money that hasn't been paid out of the project budget yet? Roughly.
I would have to check that for you, but I'm going to say roughly 30,000 in rentals and testing completed so far. We still, you mentioned what the timeline is. The load center itself is 26 weeks after approval of shop drawings to get. We looked, the contractor, the design team searched. We started at 58 weeks for delivery and found the one that's been proposed 26-week lead time. So that's why the rental of the load center that's in now runs that full 26 weeks until we can do the actual install. Okay. Other work items, AV systems for the auditorium. We still are missing parts that have been caught up in supply chain like most other places for AV systems, but we have a system that is operational for school while the final computer programs are program components are still caught up in that supply chain issue. So Sean has been taught on how to use both visual and audio in the auditorium, and he can have events in the auditorium. Balance of the exterior cameras have been completed as the light fixtures go up in the parking lot, so they've been being brought online as the cameras are added. The emergency radio responder system has been installed. It's complete and operational with the exception of 2 small areas of the building that are being addressed by the installer, Oliver, at no additional cost. The project punch list continues to shrink as we move along for all contractors. And the big step this fall is landscaping across the entire site.
And I think the last time we talked, the emergency radio responder system, that was part of the grant you submitted, and we got approved for none of that, correct?
That's correct. I believe there were no facilities projects approved for any school district under the Montgomery County grant program. Educational programs, yes, but no facilities projects, to my knowledge. I see that the next slide was on the track. Joe, I don't know if you want us to keep rolling. I was going to ask Jim to come up and speak to this one.
We can. Yeah, let's stay. We can keep on the presentation and bring Jim up for the track discussion.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to talk to you about the track. A few months ago, probably in late spring, district said, hey, rather than just restoring the cinder track, we want to look at a synthetic track. So over the summer, we've been working with our civil engineer to design that track. So what's being proposed is a 6-lane synthetic track. Some minor changes from the way the layout is now. Because the lanes were a little skinnier before, we're making them wider so they meet the PIAA standard. And that really made us change the layout a little bit. We had to lengthen or sort of stretch the track out a little bit to make the total length correct. And we're really pinched between that property to the north on the west side of the site there. So the track's getting a little closer to the road than it is before, but it does still fit. So the goal there was we want to make sure we're spending a lot of money. It has to meet PIAA guidelines.
West side,
Yeah,
is that Maplewood or is that Plymouth Road?
that is Plymouth Road,
Plymouth Road.
to the left.
Okay.
Maple is on the top of the sheet. And there's one property there in the corner that sort of cuts into your site and sort of pinches us down. So the improvements are really the track. To put that in, it resulted in some more impervious surface. So we have to put in a new stormwater management, a BMP, added that to the project. So in the the upper left corner of the football field, there's going to be an additional underground stormwater storage that then feeds down, going towards the right, down towards the creek. All of this has been designed, and the engineer has submitted it to the Montgomery County Conservation District. We've also submitted it to the township. We need both of their approvals for this modification. Before we sent it in, we had a meeting with the Conservation District and with the township to go over what we were proposing, see if there were any problems. It is a major modification, but the gentleman at the Conservation District said it will be done in one review step, and we expect 30 to 40 days for that review. So we still need to get both of their approvals. In the meantime, we've sent the drawings to Penn Builders, and they have been working on a cost proposal. We got a preliminary number today, but we don't want to put it out there. We still need to vet it. Both Jamie and I want to go over in detail what they're including, what they're not including, make sure they capture everything, and we get the number correct. So that is in the works. I expect the next week or so we should have a final number from the contractor. Timing on this, we need to get our approvals. We're really trying to dovetail this in with growing seasons. So there's the growing season of the grass, and we have sod that's already in the base bid for the football field. When do we put that in? You know, we were hoping to get it in this fall. That may or may not happen. And then the other is underneath the synthetic track is asphalt. And the goal was hopefully to get the asphalt installed this fall before the plants close. Otherwise, we have to wait till spring to do it. So right now, we're really still hoping that that's the case, but it's going to revolve around these approvals and board approval of the cost. Until we have that in place, we really can't turn the contractors loose.
Did Plymouth Township bring up, did they have issues with the project?
They do not have issues with it. We talked to the township engineer, and they do not foresee any problems going, but it will have to go in front of the township for approval.
Yep, thank you.
So the sod will be placed on the field. The goal is to have the fields playable in the fall of 2023. So even if we put it in this year, we still want a year for it to stabilize and grow, and so it doesn't get torn up right away. Part of the scheme is we're also, putting in new bleachers, bleacher pad, all the field and track and field specialty zones, the long jump, the high jump pit. And we're still talking about refurbishing the Kwanzaa hut that's out there. It's been out there. It's alongside the track. It needs a little work to stay. So that's something that's still a variable. We have to decide what we're doing with that. I think by the next meeting, we'll have a concrete number to share with you. Any questions on the track?
And if we decide to go back and go with the original plan, do we have to unsubmit these from the township, or we can just say, this was already approved, we're just going
I don't
forward
think
with
so.
that?
I think we just go back to the previously approved plans, and the cost to rebuild the track is in our base bid.
Just a question, how long would you think from the time any approval is given for the project, for the asphalt to be able to be put down? Like how much in there?
I would think fairly quickly. Basically, the field is already at grade. There's not a lot of earth they'd have to move around to make this work. It's really preparing the sub base and then paving. Like I said, the track's a little wider, so they have to adjust it a little bit, but not a lot of earthwork.
Just if you want to, if that timeline, the ideal timeline is in the fall,
Yeah,
and we're already at our
Asphalt
October
plants
meeting is.
close November, Jamie? Yes. Yeah. So we're tight at the moment.
Okay, but if it was approved in October, it could still possibly happen.
We would have to check with the contractors.
I mean, for the asphalt part of
Right.
it.
That's, we'd really like to get the asphalt in this year, because then they can come back next spring when the weather breaks and put the track surface down. And we think there's a scenario where you could do the grass now or later and work over that asphalt. These are the details we're still working out with Penn Builders, what's the right sequence, but it is dependent on actual approval.
And even the track surface itself has temperature requirements before you can put that
Right,
down.
we can't put that down in
So-
winter, so
Right.
it has to be 40 degrees and rising to put the track surface down, so, we're really limited. We don't think there's a scenario where the track surface goes down this fall. That'll always be in the spring. It's just when do we do the grass and the paving is what we're trying to work out.
I understood that, I just want to make sure on the asphalt part of it, because you mentioned that.
Yeah.
And are there parts of this project, so if we go with Plan A as designed, has that already been bid out versus if we go with Plan B, we got to bid everything back out, or?
Plan A is proceed with what's already bid. We have the design done. You own the installation. Plan B is the synthetic track, and that is at an additional cost that we'll have shortly.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if you get all approvals that you need in the proper amount of time, what's the likelihood that you really can get moving? Because it seems like there might be some hesitancy to say, like, we could definitely get it done sooner than later.
I'm a little hesitant to speak for the contractor. They control their schedule and their manpower. Most of the work is by the site contractor. They're out there now, right? They're out there right now building the bus loop and the play fields and moving the dirt around. So it would seem like it would follow, hey, if we get them approval, they can just move right over to the football field. So right now, I think we're in a pretty good scenario with getting them on it quickly.
Mm-hmm.
If the site work actually waits till spring, it's a different variable because they're going to have their equipment and stuff moved off site to somewhere else, and then we're dealing with other schedules. That gets more complicated.
Thank you.
There's really no site contractor that's not working right now. They're all using every piece of equipment somewhere. So while the equipment's here, we'd love to use it.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay. This was just an aerial photo just to give you some orientation of what's there now. That's been the teacher parking lot for the last year. And you can still see the outlines of the cinder track. So that's what we're talking about, turning this into synthetic turf. Next topic, the softball dugouts.
So if I can, if it's okay with the board, we're kind of jumping around because we put everything in one presentation. So we're kind of covering all of the topics at once. So if it's okay with you guys, we're just going to kind of jump into item C, but we'll have to come back to the CMS soils at some point. So we have 2 of the 4 agenda things done, but we're now, if it's okay with you guys, we'd like to talk about the softball dugouts. Thank you.
All right. Joe came to us in the spring and asked us to put together design documents to add softball dugouts at the high school softball field. That's on the other side of the parking lot out front here. We put those documents together. We had our bidding process, and we received the bids last week on the 25th. We had 5 potential bidders at the pre-bid meeting. We got 4 bids, so that was a fairly good turnout. And the 4 contractors we received bids from are up there. You can see the numbers. FW Howder is the apparent low bidder. There is quite a range in the bids here. See that often with a small project. Talked to Frank Howder. He has honored his bid. He's not asking to withdraw it. So we have a legitimate bid. I reviewed the documents that they supplied. Everything looks in order. They gave us references. I called 3 of them. I called more than that, but I talked to 3. Each one of them gave him a rave review, which is very rare. One was the Chester County, their IU unit, and they raved about that company. So everything I've heard has been very positive. The bids are higher than we expected, or higher than we budgeted, and that seems to be happening a lot nowadays.
Can I ask how much we budgeted?
We had an initial number when we talked about just dugouts of $125,000. But you know, one of the things that is happening here is we're moving the softball field forward.
If I can just jump
Yeah,
in
jump
real
in,
quick,
Joe.
maybe I can show you guys. So, big problem that we have on the visitor side. Right now, that dugout was right home. So you would literally be at the same level. On the right. So you got FMC is oriented here. Yeah, not tall enough to get to. Well, give me a hand. So that's the one where you would then be almost at the same level if we were to try and build it into what I'm going to call the hill, because it's a hill on that side. So one side's flat. So that became the challenge of the best way to do that. Retaining walls are really expensive and stormwater gets crazy. So the option was that the field is already, at least to all the softball gurus we talked to and the athletic director, is very large. So we always get that you can't hit a home run on our field because it's actually too large. So we were looking to take about 15 feet off the field by moving it forward. So that then became a backstop, and then that got that dugout away from the walking path to where a child, or I mean, we already get sometimes kids that climb on sheds and things. This would have been a really attractive nuisance to just walk off the path and be standing on top of the dugout. So that side was the bigger challenge, which kind of got this a little bit definitely more expensive than what we had planned, but that's what threw us for a loop.
So that up there is the before you move it forward.
This picture here is after we move it.
After you move it forward. So what is that
Got it
lot?
forward.
It is already moved forward. What
So
is,
the walking path is here.
okay, what is that other thing there?
So that's just a path to the bleacher pad that we were
Right.
there.
So right now there's from the sort of tennis courts, there's a
Yeah.
pathway that comes down to the bleacher pad now.
Right.
We're extending that on that side. On the other side, there's no pathway at all down to the potential bleacher pad. So both bleacher pads are being rebuilt because once we put the dugouts in, the bleacher pad was behind the dugout and you wouldn't be able to see the plate. So we moved both bleacher pads further down the foul line so you can actually see. You can see this shot here is you're sitting on the bleachers and you can still see home plate. We wanted to make sure the parents could actually see the kids hit. So that was another one of the cost issues is, well, we can't just use the one that was there. We have to move and rebuild them. And as Joe mentioned, on the visitor side, there's a hill there. So we have to excavate out to put the bleacher pad in, to put the dugout in, and the pathway. So there were some items that, you know, once we got into the actual design on this site, were additional costs. And that's why we're seeing, you know, the big difference between the two.
I have a question about the cost. So outside of the cost, obviously the difference is the highest being $494.07. That's a huge difference. So what are some of the other major differences in these bids outside of cost? I'm just making sure we're not sacrificing
The
quality.
range?
Yes,
Well,
that's a huge range.
talking to Howder, they self-perform a lot of their work and they self-perform their site work. which to me means they're very efficient on their site costs. One of the costs we see going through the roof on bids right now is site numbers. And if a contractor is subbing out the site work, well, they're paying a higher price for that. So if they're self-performing it with their own equipment, their own labor, that's why we're seeing their number lower than the others. But there's still a big range between.
Yeah,
And it may be that Walter Brooker
doesn't want the job.
didn't want, they put out a number to,
I
you
mean,
know, they work with us a lot. They work with the district a lot. They did us maybe a favor. They bid, but
Yeah.
it wasn't a
We've-
competitive bid.
We've found that with a lot of projects, right, Joe, that some companies don't want a small project like this, so they jack up their bid, and fine, if you're willing to give us $494,000, we'll come do it. But they don't really want the work. So there's been, I mean, Joe, there are so
You're
many
correct.
projects, we've had a huge gap.
It does happen. It does happen. I mean, I prefer, like you guys all do, a tight competitive bid, makes you feel better, but there's no way to avoid the one contractor that's going to say, all right, well, I really don't want it, but if they're going to give me $500,000, then I'll do it. So,
And, you know, Walter Brooker has done lots of projects with us recently in the district. They gave us a good number for the learning cottages.
Didn't they do this building?
they
They
did.
did do work on this building.
They're a very good contractor.
They did the wall repair at Conshohocken Elementary. So they've been a good contractor, giving us good bids. This one just wasn't there. I think the big issue right now is the schedule. We have told the contractors we would give them a notice to proceed on October 1st. And the reason we're doing that is we need them to get the concrete and masonry work done this fall before it gets cold, so that then they can finish up in early spring and be ready. They have to be done by March 1st. The first use of the fields is like the 6th of March. So we only have a few days grace there. That puts a lot of pressure on the board. If you want to proceed with this bid, I really recommend that you approve it at this coming board meeting. If not, I think we have to reevaluate the schedule.
So I have a question. With the use of it being March 6th, and we're saying they need to be complete by March 1st, is that cutting it a little too close? That's 5 days. So we're not leaving a lot of room for any kind of issues that could occur.
That's a great question, Gail. I mean, I would be pretty foolish to say that weather or something else couldn't rush in and cause us problems. So it is an aggressive schedule, but I think that the contractors themselves wouldn't buy into it if they thought they couldn't hit it. They would be the ones that would really be telling us, like, hey, and I don't think we would have gotten even the 4 bids we got if someone was afraid of the time schedule.
So we're thinking they could come in prior to March 1st. We're just saying March 1st is our deadline.
Correct. That is our deadline, and that's the safest way to put it. But yeah, we would obviously push for as early as possible. And we got that date from when spring sports start, Gail. So that's where we kind of came up. It's like March 6th, so we thought, hey, let's make sure it's the 1st, or, that they're on the field, because there are other fields they could practice on till then.
One of the things we have working in our favor is while we're moving the field forward, it's really all within the dirt area of the field. It's the infield. So the grass, all of the grass of the field stays the way it is. We're not waiting time to play on new grass. The field will be the existing grass. There will be new grass around the dugouts and all that, but to use the actual field, it will be ready to play on. And what we really are looking for is to get the contractors out of there with building the dugouts and putting in the backstop and that. If they're still raking straw around, that can be tolerated, but we're tight, but we think it's definitely doable.
And I guess this is a question for Dave, maybe. So if I heard the original budget was 125, and now we're talking 307, like where's the rest of the 175-ish coming from? Or proposed to
My
come
heart's
from
racing, my
anyway?
blood pressure's up right now. And we still have a couple more issues to cover. I was going to cover that at the end after we do all the facilities, yeah.
I'm just going to put my opinion out there. I don't think it's a a yes or no. I mean, we have to do this from a Title IX perspective. I don't see how we, once again, tell the girls' sports that, yeah, it's too expensive and we can't afford to do it. I mean, we had money left over that we never closed out of the high school project. I mean, we have to find, not to cause you angst before your retirement, but we have to find the money, because I'm not telling one more parent that, yeah, we know the softball field is nothing like the baseball field, but that's okay. I mean, I
agree with that.
So we'll give you a little hint. Dave's news at the end is good.
You tell us he was, you know.
Because
Because he
anytime it
still
comes to
doesn't like
spending
spending
my
money.
blood pressure goes up.
He wants to keep us guessing
All
all the
right,
way
all
to the
right,
end.
all right. Well, I just
No
wanted
spoiler
to.
alert
I just
here.
wanted to put a little pressure on you there,
Okay.
Dave.
I was starting to feel like it was America's Got Talent commercial, and we're going to bring it back again. So I thought, just hold on.
So, just to summarize though, kind of what's there we're saying isn't acceptable. And then when we went through and we designed what had to be there to meet what we said was acceptable, this is the cost. Whereas our original budget was just throw up a couple cinder blocks, make a dugout. And then we realized we've got to grade, we got to move the field, we got to build this. So this isn't an inflation or a supply chain thing. This is what the project scope actually was. We just didn't know when we started. And now that we've seen the project scope, it's always going to be this number.
I think it's a combination, to be honest. It's a combination of both. Yeah, I mean, again, not knowing what it would take to get that hill together and how close the elevations would be till we had someone come out and do a survey. I think it's a combination of both.
So it's something though that like waiting a year doesn't make costs come back down. It only goes up, right?
No, I mean, not from my perspective. And I wish I had that crystal ball. I might be investing in something if I knew that. But no, I don't think we could. Again, we looked at those avenues, and that was one of the things Dr. Christian asked us right away. Is there any other, any other thing we could do? Look at the engineering, look at the scope. But that's honestly where we started, because a retaining wall against that one side would have been more expensive. It would have been more expensive to engineer, more expensive to install. So just moving the field was the best way to accomplish what we thought, was fair.
So do we have approval to move this project forward for the meeting next week? Or 2 weeks? Yeah.
We have to vote.
Oh, I didn't
Well,
realize.
no, we only need,
5.
yeah, I mean, I think,
We can
we can wait for Gail, but we need to move it and vote at our September
On
meeting.
the 15th.
Yeah,
correct.
we would look for you guys to approve it on the 15th.
Is everybody here willing to move it forward?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it'll be on that agenda then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Really getting.
He's okay. Don't be
I have a
fooled.
solution.
So,
He's got.
I'll be, knowing that, I'm probably going to send out a notice of intent to award,
Yes.
so they know it's coming, and start getting contracts together with Dave and the solicitor. Because, once the board approves it, we want to send out the contracts, get them signed, and get out there October 1st.
Yeah, so we'll move forward with that. We can work on the
Yeah.
notice, the letter of intent, and then we'll work through Dave's office.
Thanks,
Excellent.
Jim.
All right,
Thank you, Jim.
thank you.
So I appreciate the board moving around in circles, and unfortunately having a meeting where we have one more bit of news that probably isn't great news, but if Mr. Lynch could return, we need to just discuss the remaining soil on the site.
Wait a minute.
Of-
Every time Mr. Lynch gets up here, it's not good news. Have you noticed that?
That's not true. That's not true.
No comment.
Just an update then on soils issue for Colonial Middle School, and this goes back really from the beginning of the project, and so recognizing there's a few new board members here, I'll go back as well. And the challenge that we faced from the beginning of the project is soils were excavated, and we knew that there was going to be excess soil from the project. And as excavation continued, one large thing changed, and that was DEP's management of fill policy. And it changed the requirements for the constituents of soils to be moved off-site. And right away, one of the significant compounds that's tested for, the maximum level in parts per million in soil was dramatically decreased, which put us in a holding pattern. A holding pattern meant we had to keep soil here on site. We've also gone through the project and had a little bit of a disagreement with the general contractor on how much soil was going to be excavated. And this has been ongoing. You've seen it in my monthly reports, and we've talked about it at other facilities and board meetings from time to time. Well, here we are at the end of the project trying to close out, and we know that we're left with some excess soils. Also, back at the time of bidding, we rejected a bid alternate to take soils off-site right away and then bring back what was required. And that was a bid alternate that was roughly around $200,000 that we decided not to take. So all of that culminates now with trying to determine how much soil is left and the responsibility for removing it from the site. What we've done initially is to try to find places where we can keep the soil on site, because that's obviously cheaper than putting it in a dump truck and hauling it someplace, especially if it needs to be hauled as regulated fill or something that can't be deposited somewhere very close to the site. So some of that soil has been permitted to be reused on the ball fields and in other locations. We've also had a meeting with the tech school as far as leaving some of the soil that's on the tech school site where it is in a usable fashion for the tech school. And I think that has been met with an agreeable attitude, and I know the civil engineer is putting together a grading plan in order to leave some soils there. So the question is, how much is left for soil? And the other thing is, how much in that pile that you see over there behind New Hope is rock? Because you don't own rock. The contractor owns rock. So when you see boulders that are piled there, that's part of the unclassified alternate that you did take. So those rocks go in a truck, they get hauled off. No harm, no foul.
At the builder's expense.
Correct. So here at the end, we have more soil that has to be moved onto the athletic field site. We're going to be left with an amount. What that amount is based on how much rock is in the pile, how much the tech school allows us to remain, and a couple other locations very local to the township and to the site where we might get rid of some soil. Then we'll be left with a nut that we have to take care of. And that's what we've been working on really from the start in order to mitigate the impact, avoid a tremendous amount of cost. And I think we're within shooting range of it right now. And I'll just have to provide you with an update after we get all the soil placed, we get the rock moved away, we get an answer from the tech school and some others to understand how much is left and what type of cost impact there would be or contribution that would be requested of the school district.
Okay, so I won't ask you how much, but I'll ask you how upset you have, Mr. Zablowski.
Well, he's already found a solution for the dugout problem. I don't know if he's got a solution for this problem or not. I can tell you that from all accounts, the project has been on budget, if not under budget, that there is some contingency that's remaining in the project that can be used for things like the load center, like the soils. Fortunately, we're in I think a good financial situation. That is not to say that we would just use the contingency. If I follow the leadership of Dr. Christian, who would be here in the room saying we're not paying for nothing, which he said all the way.
So you beat me to it because we're not owning all of this one way or another.
That's why I use the word contribution.
And again, this is kind of like the load thing. I know nothing about it, but it seems logical that when they knew how much dirt they had to dig up, they knew how much dirt would be left.
Yes, and there are components of this that belong to the contractor, and there are ones that I would suggest that the district provide a contribution for. For instance, the contractor couldn't readily haul the material off because of the change in the DEP policy, so it had to sit. Then we had to double handle it and put it next to the middle school and find extra areas for it. These are all the things that we discussed, you might remember, back at the time of bidding.
Right.
Because we talked at length about the extra $200,000, and we as a team decided not to take it in favor of the unclassified excavation in which the contractor would own the rock.
So did we lose that bet?
And we would see. I don't know that we've lost that bet.
Okay.
I think it's been managed well. We've kept everyone informed. The problem, when it arose earlier in the project, was thought to be a much larger problem than it is today. I think, I have always, I have recalculated the amount of soils that were excavated. I am resolute in telling the general contractor that he owns a good portion of it. I am going to come back and ask for a contribution from the district for what I think is fair to handle the soils. In any event, regardless of whether they had it or not, in order to pay the fair share of taking the soils that were always there is a reasonable thing to do, and it's also a reasonable thing to close out the project rather than go into some protracted argument. As long as in your eyes and the administration's eyes that it's reasonable.
So right now, the rock is mixed in with the soil. So if we tell the contractor or the GC that he needs to take the rock out first, then we know what we have left.
Essentially, yes. Tricky situation, but
he's the one that put it all in one pile to begin with, correct?
he's the one that's put it on the pile to begin with, based on the limited area that we had on the site, based on now it starts to get muddy. But if you've watched the township side of the property in the past several weeks, you've seen large piles of rock, and they've been put in dump trucks and taken off site. That's him sorting those piles that were immediately next to the middle school.
Okay.
And he's taking the soil and he's hauling the rock out. So in that respect, that's what he's doing. But for me to say, go and sift through the pile, take the rock, and tell me, no, we have to come up with a plan. So he's taking soil someplace, he's taking rock someplace on his dime, and we come to an agreement in order to close this thing out, rather than, okay, do this, and then we'll do this, and then we'll do this. That ultimately ends up costing everybody more money.
Right, but we don't know what our contribution would be if we don't know how much soil is actually left.
That's my job, to provide you with a recommendation. So we still have a couple of steps to go, and I'll come back to you with that information, the best information that we have.
Sorry, Jamie. Yeah, I know that KCBA and Dewey and all of us have tried our best to mitigate our exposure on this by trying to figure out ways to use the soil. So, I think, it was a higher number get lower. We keep working to lower that number. And then once we can bring it back when we know that the rock is gone, but we're closer to giving you that number, but it's something that the board just needs to be aware of until we can get you an exact number, and then we can then review from our perspective what we think is our contribution.
What's the timeline for when we'll hear what the number might be, and also when it will be removed?
I'd like to give you something at the October facilities meeting, and we would, again, with the track and everything happening, what we don't want to do is have them take a break. So while they're there and they're working on the track, presumably, or maybe trying to get all this stuff squared away is what we want to do. We don't want to let it linger. We don't want to come back a year from now and go at it. We want to knock it out when we have the opportunity.
Okay. Any more questions for Mr. Lynch? I know that was enough, so I want him to sit down, so I'm going to obey you guys. Just kidding, Jamie. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right, I do have a
So
question
if
for
we
you.
can, we can just, if we can go to Mr. Zablowski, if you want to, now would be a great time to let
You have
everyone
a
know the good
question,
news.
Mr. Lally?
Sure.
No, go ahead. I can ask after.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
This action items from today are dugout only. Everything else is keep an open mind because there's numbers coming our way.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the only solid number we have right now. So obviously, talking about the dugout, we put the 5-year capital projects together with the best information we had at that time. So who would have guessed we would have the inflation we have right now, the supply chain, everything else it has. So that document's always going to be changeable. So we just have to change our priorities. Right now in the capital projects fund, we have a little bit under $8 million. We spent about 1.2 to do the Conshohocken roof this summer. That was the only big project we had. So it's just a matter of shifting the priorities to Title IX and the dugouts for this year. So we have good news in the Finance Committee, so we'll talk about that. One thing I alluded to in board notes a couple weeks ago was that the high school project, is completely done. No more punch list left. As of June 30th, we have $473,000 in there. So mixing finance with facilities, we'd like to propose closing Fund 39 and have board action to move the money from the PW construction fund into the middle school construction fund. Yes, sir.
If we have money in the PW fund, since it's like moving, like a shell game with where the money is,
Correct.
couldn't we use the PW fund to pay for the dugouts?
Well, I mean, Fund 39 was for the construction of the middle schools and the additions and renovations to the high school. This being 4 years after the fact,
Oh,
we'd
so it
like to
does-
clear it out through Fund 32,
Okay.
which is a capital reserve fund.
Okay.
Okay. So that's what we would propose, moving the $473,000 either to Fund 32, the capital reserve fund, to pay for the dugouts, or move it to Fund 38 to help offset some of the costs for the synthetic track. And so my recommendation would just move it to Fund 38 because we know the synthetic track's going to probably be more than the $473,000, so that's a good start towards it. All right. So if we're good with that, that'll appear on the September 15th board. Now, as far as the capital projects fund, then we have a little bit less than $8 million in there. After we go through the finances, which is the 10,000-foot overview of the results of 21-22, we're probably going to have more money in the capital reserve fund because we had a really good year. So, but we'll defer that for Mr. Winchester's meeting.
So you get the bad news and Will gets the
Yeah.
good news.
Okay.
So then the last item on the FMT is a transportation update. Today being the first day of school, it was kind of a hectic day in transportation. The weather did not help. After 6 weeks of no rain, we think a lot of people forgot how to drive in the rain. Good news, no accidents, but always on the first day it's interesting because we have kids getting off the bus and they're new to the school, they don't know where to go, so it added a little bit of lateness to our entire runs in the morning. And then in the afternoon, all the schools are getting used to their dismissals, so we had buses kind of late into the afternoon taking the kids home because they were late getting out of school because they're still ironing out all the kinks. Now, we did have quite a few kids show up today for school that didn't have transportation. We got several phone calls when we sent out the survey and said, can you take your child to school? And people said yes. That was the opt-out. They didn't realize they were opting out. So no bus came today, and they were wondering why. So we got a lot of phone calls. So we're going to get them scheduled going forward. But Christopher Brown put together some what he calls fun facts. The total student population in our district is 6,500 kids, 64. There's 901 non-public school kids that we have to transport. We have 383 parents that opted out of transportation, which is very welcome, and we have 587 walkers. So that means public school kids, we are transported today 5,594 kids. There are 73 bus routes split between First Student Transportation and SAG Transportation, and that's down 13 runs from where we were just a couple years ago. But the good news is they were all covered by drivers. So we're still looking for drivers. They don't have a long enough bench for us because we know that there's going to be sickness and people that call out. So we are still trying to get bus drivers. We did have the weather related, so the dismissal process was longer than we thought. And we got some unfortunate news. Last Friday, one of our internal bus drivers told us the day before school started that she was resigning. So we were scrambling. Sandy Serbaka from the transportation office covered her bus run this morning, and we have a certified driver who's also a home monitor at the high school who helped us out in the afternoon, and we're going to hopefully get somebody hired. Christopher has somebody in mind that we're stealing from another contractor. So that's our transportation report for this year. So
We don't steal.
My one only question is, what would you say is the last child off the bus today? Like, how late was that?
A little bit after 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Sobolewski, I've had numerous people this summer, two just recently, who asked about our busing and seemed very surprised at the rules we have to follow about busing to private and parochial schools. So if those two people, just in my passing, asked that question, I think there are a lot of people who don't know. You want to quickly explain it and do you know off the top of your head how many private and parochial schools we're busing to this year?
Well, by school code, we have to transport children to any school within 10 miles of our boundary. Gets kind of complicated because if we have somebody on the main line, but they're in Fort Washington, and it's a long way to go our entire district length and then go to the main line.
So it's 10 miles from the radius from the perimeter
Correct.
of the district.
And within that perimeter, there are over 100 non-pubs. And that's where those 901 kids have to be delivered.
I just think a lot of people aren't aware of our obligation to do that
Yes. And
by state law.
Yeah, and they're becoming more aware because what we try to do is efficiently try to group all the kids in one bus that would go to a region, and that region might service 5 or 6 or 7 of the schools. So we're intermingling the schools on one bus so that we don't have one bus for one child and one bus for 3 children. So that's hard to explain to them, but that's what we guarantee, that they will have transportation. We didn't say how efficient it would be or that they would have their own private bus, but they are being transported to those schools.
Yeah, so just for anybody who's listening, that means we go to Jenkintown, we go to Chester County,
Yes.
we go to Delaware County, we go
Because
to
we're
Bucks
looking
County.
at 10 miles is reaches into a lot of other counties for sure.
So it's a very difficult process, and thank Christopher for all the hard work he and his department did for this.
They have been
to get
very
this
busy
going.
this summer. So
Thanks.
How quickly is the setup? So if a family moves into the district and their child goes to a private non-pub school, what's the process for like how quickly can we get that child on a bus to get
usually
to the
within a
school?
week, we have to evaluate where the buses are currently going, what the loads are on each of and that counts for public school kids too, because if we have 4 or 5 kids on a route that already has 65 kids on the bus, that's going to put us over the limit, and now we're going to have to segregate and maybe split it into 2 bus runs, or load up another bus run. So normally we can do it within a week. Where we really have the issue is when there's special ed placements that come in last minute because the IEP has just been formulated, and the private school is that possibly outside the 10-mile radius where we have to take that child. So that, especially kids, we try to do that as soon as possible, but depending on where they're placed, it might take up to 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are we fully staffed for like after school and activity buses as well? Like are all those runs?
The middle school has an after school activity bus, and we're trying to get First Student to handle that. We used a Superior Transportation last year to help us out there. So last year was the first year for Superior. I think we're going to have a couple part-time after-school runs for Superior this year.
And I just wanted clarification or confirmation. So when we say we provide transportation for other schools that are non-public, so if a student is going to a public school outside of our district, we do not provide that transportation?
That's correct. It's just non-public, yes.
Thank you.
I just, a general overall statement, if I could invite us to use language such as students who have IEPs versus special education students, I think that would be more welcoming for our students. I'm just going to put that out there.
Okay.
Did you say we have one activity bus for the middle school?
No, I think
Or just one company that covers them?
I think it's just one company.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, and I think that completes our agenda.
That's the last item on the agenda. I do want to just take a very brief minute to thank our custodial staff who worked really hard all summer getting the schools ready. I think all the principals would agree with that they all did a really good job. We were shorthanded through retirements and some pieces missing, but everybody really pitched in. I know it sounds like a cliche, but it really is team. It's team from Drew's guys working with our guys. It's technology, it's curriculum, it's everybody. There's a lot of moving pieces. So in the upcoming board weeks, I'm going to try and highlight some of the things that the maintenance guys did, because there's some nice work they did building shelving and doors, and some things that Turf did, landscaping down at Conshohocken out by the sign. So I'll try and send you guys some pictures. But again, it's a team effort with everyone. We all have to work together, and there's so many people to thank. It would take a long time, but the staff really comes together in the summer and finds a way to get it all done. And the beginning of the school year seems to go off great. So I want to thank all those people.
And just would also like to thank you. I understand you work this weekend, Labor Day weekend.
Sometimes, yeah.
So just thank you not only to your staff, but to you as well for everything you've done to get the schools ready.
You're welcome. I'm only as good as the team, though. Thank you.
Are there any other board comment? Any public comment come in since?
None at this time.
Okay, well then, meeting adjourned.
All right, so we're going to start our finance meeting. Are there any public?
None at this time.
All right, I'm going to kick it over to Mr. Zablowski.
So obviously, June 30th is the end of our fiscal year. Our budget process has started. The auditors were on site for one day to start the process. They'll be back in October to complete that. But I wanted to give the board a overview of where we're at. Now, obviously, these are unaudited and they're subject to change. But I wanted to first say that if we look at the way we present this now, 2 years of 1920 and 2021 were definitely affected by COVID. We presented these 4 years because 18-19 was the last normal year that we had. You'll see that as we go through this, that we've sort of returned to where we're at in 18-19. So going forward for the 22-23 year, we will be eliminating the 3 prior years so we can get the print a little bit bigger that we can see it. So if I blow this up a little bit more, I'd like to start with the expenditures. Let's get over there. Okay, so for expenditures, you can see that we budgeted $140,866,704 to date. And this is with our accruals in place. We have $140,464,223. So 99.71% of our expenditures. We're pretty proud that we came within 0.29% of our budget. Obviously, budget being a live document, we had to manage it during the year. And you can see that the only places that we really went over the budget were slightly in supplies at 100.65%. But the big one was in professional services. This is where special education services came in, and also a lot of our subs, because we contracted out our subs to STS, and we spent a lot of the ESSER's money to bring in more educators so that we could help the kids get back up to speed. So we were about 134% of what we had budgeted. Now, we are still using some STS, but maybe we're hoping not to the same extent that we have in past years. Everything else is within 1% or less, so we were very happy with the results of that. The positive of this budget was the revenue side. Obviously, looking at this from coming out of COVID, it was kind of tough to say how revenue was going to show up because, real estate market and the transfer of properties and interims and all that, we came in at 103.45% of budget. But that also includes the fact that we thought we were going to use $3.1 million of fund balance to balance the budget. Well, we didn't need that, so we have used none of our unassigned fund balance. And we're about $5 million over where we thought we were going to be. So I did attach a specific revenue analysis, and you can see where the items are that we came in over budget. These are the toughest line items to budget. Number one was interim real estate taxes. That's where you take an unapproved lot and they build and they sell the lot, and it increases in value. So normally July 1st we send out a tax bill for $10,000 or $1,000 for an unimproved lot. Now you have a $400,000-$500,000 house in there, and we sent out an interim tax bill. We came in at $2.36 million when we budgeted $750,000. Now, all these numbers I'm going to cover are records. These are the highest these four categories came in the last 5 years. So interim taxes, the highest we ever came in was $1.5 million, and we blew that away with 2.366. So we never would have expected that kind of activity. The next one was payment in lieu of taxes. This one had to do with 7 Tower Bridge Road, which we have a pilot, which is an incentive for them to improve the lot down in Conshohocken. And they paid us about $250,000 more than we had expected. Then we had our earned income taxes. It's 25% above budget, but it totaled $2.3 million. Now, we think this is a function of the people that are still working out of their homes and not working in the city of Philadelphia, because as they work in Plymouth and White Marsh and Conshohocken, they are paying only 1% tax, and that comes directly to us, where if they would be paying the local tax in Philadelphia, we wouldn't see that. So as people are getting back in the office, we do not expect this to continue, but this was a very pleasant surprise. The most that we received in the last 5 years of earned income taxes, $10.8 million, and we came in at 11.4. So again, a record year for earned income tax collection. Then we had transfer taxes, again, 30% over budget, $879,000 more than expected. We actually had properties in Conshohocken that were sold to different owners a couple times in 12 months. And each time that happens, we get 0.5% of a transfer tax. Now, who would have expected that was going to happen? So we came in above that. And then we had the other large was delinquent tax collection, and that's because we had a very favorable year of assessment appeals, and we collected $2.5 million more than we had expected, and the assessment appeals alone accounted for $2.55 million. So we were very happy that the assessments came in where they did. This is all a very nice problem to have, obviously. So we came in local revenue came in about 7.189 more than we had expected. Just for those reasons. The state, we came in within 1%, 214,000 more than expected. And the federal, the ESSER funds from the American Rescue Plan came in about 50% more. That's the $3.4 million we got for ESSERs that we have until September of 2024 to spend. We found a purpose to spend that on summer programs, additional teaching, a lot of the substitutes to get the kids up to speed. So we accelerated our plan, and we spent a little bit more, so which means we're going to have less to spend in the 22-23 and the 23-24 year. So that's all a good problem to have. Going back to the budget comparison, you can see that we're going to be showing a pretty significant surplus this year, which, as I alluded to in the FMT meeting, we're going to have an unassigned fund balance that's going to exceed the 8% we're allowed. So after the audit's done, we'll likely come to the Finance Committee and say we're going to have to transfer some of that money out of the general fund unassigned fund balance and move that into capital projects. So that'll take care of those added expenditures that were just enumerated in the FMT meeting. So overall, it was a very good year. Expenditures we nailed, revenues not so much, but they ended up to the positive variance, and that is good for the school district.
Looking forward to next year with this kind of surplus, will we consider not raising taxes next year?
We could. there's inflationary factors that are going to continue to put pressure on us. The fuel, we just locked in the fuel. As you notice, the prices of fuel have come down over the last couple months. So we took advantage of that and locked in our pricing. It is almost a 50% increase over this past year. So we'll have to see where that comes in. They're already warning us that natural gas and electricity is going to go up pretty significantly this year. So we will definitely consider that as we put the budget together for next year.
Because inflation really hits hard to the individual families too, so, who have less to start with, so it'd be
Right.
nice if we could consider that.
And we only raised taxes half of the Act 1 index this year in recognition of that. So we will consider doing that again for this year.
And would your expectation be that those revenue numbers, we're not going to match them this coming year? We're going to be closer to the original budget numbers with the...
I would think so. I mean, how I look at the budget, I look at the 5-year average and look at the trend of how it's going up. Nobody would have expected we would have hit these kind of record numbers in a year coming out of COVID. As we all know, we are represented an exceptional area, exceptional school district, and this goes to show that, we are still very exceptional when it comes to, the taxes and, the value of the properties within the school district. No questions? All right, I just have one more important announcement I would like to share with the board. And if you look at the screen, I'd like to introduce you to my new granddaughter.
Hey, congratulations! She's beautiful.
She was born yesterday at 6:23 in the morning. So my daughter-in-law went into labor on Labor Day, and so now we have a beautiful little girl, which I'm going to meet for the first time on Thursday. So
Nice, congratulations.
What's her name?
Mina Rose. Mina Rose. Yeah.
It's the best thing ever, Dave.
Yeah. I'm all excited.
It is, it's great.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Better than kids because you get to give them back.
That's right. All right, and that concludes my agenda.